The glint of sunlight off the Winchester rifle caught Felicity Reed's eye a second before the rough hands of the outlaw seized her arm at the well. She wasn't supposed to be alone, Pa had warned her, but the drought had stretched on for weeks, and their cistern had finally run dry on this sweltering July afternoon in 1878. "Well, ain't you a pretty little thing?" drawled the taller of the three men, his yellow teeth bared in what passed for a smile. His companions flanked him, dust-covered and dangerous, their eyes crawling over her like desert scorpions. Felicity tightened her grip on the water bucket. At 20, she'd lived her whole life in Kingston, Arizona territory, and she knew trouble when she saw it. These weren't local boys. They had the hard look of men who rode the outlaw trail, who took what they wanted and left ruin in their wake. "Let go of me," she said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "My father will be here any minute." The tall one laughed. "Your pa ain't coming, girl. We watched him ride out with them other ranchers this morning." He jerked her closer, his breath hot against her face. "You're going to fetch water for us and then keep us company a while? I believe the lady asked you to let her go." The voice came from behind the well, calm as still water, but with steel beneath. A man stepped into view, trail-worn but straight-backed. His dark hat shadowed his eyes, but Felicity could see the set of his jaw, the way his right hand hovered near the holster at his hip. "This ain't your concern, stranger," the outlaw holding Felicity snarled. "Ride on if you want to keep breathing." The stranger didn't move. "3 against 1 seems poor odds," he observed, "but I've faced worse. Now, I'll say it once more, let the lady go." The outlaws spread out, hands moving toward their guns. The tall one kept his grip on Felicity's arm, using her as a shield. "You'll fetch no water for them again," the stranger said to Felicity, his eyes holding hers for just a moment. In that instant, Felicity understood. She drove her elbow hard into her captor's ribs, wrenching herself sideways as the stranger's hand became a blur. The first shot cracked the air like thunder, catching the tall outlaw in the shoulder. He howled, releasing Felicity, who dropped to the ground as gunfire erupted around her. When the echoes faded, 3 outlaws lay on the ground, 1 dead, 2 wounded and disarmed. The stranger approached them calmly, collected their weapons, and secured the survivors with their own belts. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked, finally turning his full attention to Felicity. She rose shakily, brushing dust from her skirts. "No. Thanks to you, Mr. Thornton. Tucker Thornton." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair and eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners when he offered a tentative smile. "I was just passing through when I heard the commotion." Felicity Reed. She extended her hand, which he took briefly. "You've done Kingston a service, Mr. Thornton. These men have been terrorizing homesteads all through the territory." "Been tracking them since Tucson," he admitted. "They robbed a bank there, killed a teller." Felicity studied him with new understanding. "You're a lawman?" "Former Texas Ranger. Now I hunt bounties." He looked away, as if expecting her disapproval. "It pays for my wandering." "Well, Mr. Thornton, I suspect Kingston Sheriff will be mighty pleased to meet you." She retrieved her bucket, dipping it into the well. "But first, I think we both could use some water." Sheriff Daniels was indeed pleased to take custody of the notorious Harker gang, especially when he learned of the substantial bounty on their heads. While Tucker handled the paperwork, Felicity insisted on treating the cut on his cheek from a bullet that had grazed too close. "You've got a steady hand, Miss Reed," Tucker observed as she applied iodine to the wound in the sheriff's office. "Comes from helping Pa with the ranch," she replied. "After Ma died of the fever 5 years back, I had to learn doctoring along with everything else." Tucker winced, though whether from the sting of the medicine or sympathy for her loss, Felicity couldn't tell. "Your father runs a cattle operation?" "Reed's Crossing. Small spread about 3 miles east. Nothing fancy, but it's ours." She finished her ministrations and stepped back. "Pa will want to thank you properly. We'd be honored if you'd join us for supper tonight." Tucker hesitated. "I don't want to impose—" "Nonsense," Sheriff Daniels interjected. "Hiram Reed sets a fine table, and it'll take me a day to process your bounty anyway. Might as well enjoy some home cooking while you wait." That evening, Tucker approached the modest but well-maintained Reed ranch house with uncharacteristic nervousness. He'd faced armed desperados with less trepidation than he felt at the prospect of a family supper. Hiram Reed proved to be a barrel-chested man with a firm handshake and warm welcome. "Any man who saves my daughter and brings down the Harker gang deserves the best we've got," he declared, ushering Tucker inside. The meal was simple but delicious venison stew, fresh-baked bread, and apple pie that made Tucker think of a childhood home he hadn't seen in 15 years. Throughout the evening, he found his gaze drawn repeatedly to Felicity, to the graceful way she moved, the intelligence in her eyes, and the quiet strength in her manner. "Mr. Thornton was a Texas Ranger, Pa," Felicity said as they finished their coffee. Hiram's eyebrows rose. "That's so? What company?" "E Company, sir. Under Captain McNelly." Tucker's expression remained neutral, but Felicity noticed his knuckles whitening around his coffee cup. "Tough outfit," Hiram nodded approvingly. "What made you leave?" Tucker set his cup down carefully. "Lost my taste for it after Palo Duro Canyon." Understanding crossed Hiram's face. The battle at Palo Duro was infamous, the Army's destruction of Comanche winter camps, the slaughter of their horse herds. Many considered it necessary to end the raids. Others saw only tragedy in it. "War leaves marks on a man," Hiram said quietly. "I rode with Sibley in '62, saw things I wish I hadn't." Tucker nodded, grateful for the understanding. The conversation turned to lighter topics: the cattle market, local gossip, predictions about the drought. When Tucker finally rose to leave, Hiram surprised him. "That line shack of ours needs work before winter," the older man said casually. "Could use a skilled hand for a few weeks if you're interested in honest work between bounties. Pays fair, includes meals." Tucker looked from father to daughter, sensing there was more to the offer than just employment. "I'd be obliged, Mr. Reed. Thank you." Over the following weeks, Tucker found himself settling into an unfamiliar routine. Mornings began before dawn, working alongside Hiram and the ranch's 2 hired hands. Afternoons were spent repairing fences, mending tack, and slowly restoring the line shack to weather-tight condition. Evenings brought him back to the main house, where Felicity's cooking and company became something he looked forward to more than he cared to admit. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson, Felicity broke their comfortable silence. "Will you go back to bounty hunting when the work here is done?" Tucker considered the question. "It's what I know. Is it what you want?" He turned to look at her, struck by how the fading light softened her features. "What I want and what's possible aren't always the same thing, Miss Reed." "Felicity," she corrected him. "After a month of suppers together, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Felicity," he agreed, liking the way her name felt on his tongue. "What about you? Always planned to stay in Kingston?" She sighed, looking out at the land that had shaped her. "I love this place, but sometimes I wonder what else might be out there. I've never even seen the ocean." "Pacific's not so far," Tucker said. 3-4 weeks ride, depending on your pace." "Is it as vast as they say?" "Bigger. Makes a person feel small, but in a good way." He smiled at the memory. Water stretching out until it meets the sky, moving and changing every moment. "I'd like to see that someday," she said softly. "Maybe you will." Their eyes met briefly before Tucker looked away, suddenly conscious of how easy it would be to make promises he had no right to keep. The next day brought news that changed everything. A rider from town delivered a telegram for Tucker. A notorious murderer had been spotted in Prescott, and the bounty was substantial. Enough to set a man up comfortably, if he were of a mind to settle. "When will you leave?" Felicity asked that evening, her voice carefully neutral as they walked back from checking a spring that had begun to run low. "I haven't decided that I am," Tucker replied, surprising himself as much as her. "But the bounty will still be there next week." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Felicity, I've spent 10 years chasing men who needed killing. Sometimes I think maybe there's more to life than that." The hope that flickered across her face gave him courage. "There is," she said simply. He took her hand, half expecting her to pull away. When she didn't, he felt something shift inside him, like a door long bolted finally swinging open. "I'm not a good man, not the kind a woman like you deserves." "I think I'll be the judge of what I deserve, Tucker Thornton." Her fingers tightened around his. "And I've never seen anything but good in you." Their first kiss was hesitant, a question asked and answered beneath the vast Arizona sky. When they finally continued their walk back to the ranch house, something fundamental had changed between them. Hiram Reed watched the development with a father's mixture of protectiveness and hope. One evening, he invited Tucker to share a bottle of whiskey after Felicity had retired. "My daughter's taken with you," he said bluntly, pouring 2 measures. Tucker accepted his glass but didn't drink immediately. "The feeling's mutual, sir." "And what do you plan to do about that?" Hiram fixed him with a level gaze. "Depends on how you'd feel about having an ex-ranger and bounty hunter for a son-in-law." Tucker met the older man's eyes steadily. "If I thought she'd have me," Hiram's weathered face broke into a slow smile. "About time you asked." He raised his glass. "To family." "To family," Tucker echoed, the word unfamiliar but welcome on his lips. The courtship that followed was brief by the standards of polite society, but perfectly paced for 2 people who had learned to recognize truth when they found it. Tucker rode to Prescott, but not for a bounty for a ring, simple but elegant, that he could afford thanks to the reward money from the Harker gang. They were married in Kingston's small church on a clear October day, with half the county in attendance. Tucker stood before the altar in a new suit, scarcely believing his fortune as Felicity walked toward him on her father's arm, radiant in her mother's carefully preserved wedding dress. "Never thought I'd see the day," Sheriff Daniels murmured to Hiram at the reception. "Tucker Thornton hanging up his guns for good." "Man finds what he's looking for. He stops searching," Hiram replied, watching his daughter dance with her new husband. The newlyweds moved into the freshly renovated line shack, transformed into a cozy cabin that offered privacy while keeping them close enough to help with the ranch. Winter came early that year, bringing welcome snow to the drought-parched land. On cold evenings they would sit before the fire, planning their future together. "I've been thinking," Tucker said one night, Felicity's head resting against his shoulder. "Come spring, we could drive the herd to California instead of selling local. Better prices and you'd get to see that ocean." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "You'd do that?" "I'd do a lot more than that to see you smile like you are now." He traced the curve of her cheek with his fingertips. "Besides, I've been studying those cattle journals. If we invest in some Hereford stock while we're out west, we could improve the herd." "Listen to you," she laughed softly, already talking like a born cattleman. "I'm learning from the best," he said, meaning both her and her father. "Never thought I'd find peace in one place, but this land, it grows on a person." "It's in your blood now," she agreed, "just like it's in mine." Spring arrived with new beginnings. The cattle drive to California was arduous but successful, and Felicity finally stood at the edge of the Pacific, her eyes wide with wonder as waves crashed against the shore. Tucker watched her joy, knowing he'd made the right choice in laying down his guns for a life at her side. They returned to Kingston with premium prices for their beef and 4 Hereford bulls that would transform the Reed herd in the coming years. The ranch began to prosper under their combined efforts. Tucker's strategic thinking and willingness to try new methods complementing Hiram's experience and Felicity's fierce dedication to the land. The following spring brought another blessing when their son, Samuel Hiram Thornton, was born. Tucker held his newborn son with trembling hands, overwhelmed by love and a fierce protectiveness he'd never known before. "He has your eyes," Felicity said tiredly from the bed, her face glowing despite the difficult labor. "Poor boy," Tucker joked, though his voice caught. "He has your spirit, though. Listen to those lungs." Hiram, waiting anxiously outside, burst into tears when Tucker placed his grandson in his arms. "Continuation," the old rancher said simply. "That's what it's all about." As months passed and their child grew, Tucker sometimes thought about the man he'd been that day, at the well a drifter with blood on his hands and emptiness in his heart. The change in him still seemed miraculous. One evening, while Felicity nursed Samuel before the fire, Tucker found himself telling her about his darkest days after leaving the Rangers, about the nightmares that had driven him to hunt men rather than face his own demons. "I was lost," he admitted. "Taking bounties was just a way to feel I was still doing some good in the world, bringing in men worse than me." "You were never what you thought you were," Felicity said gently. "I saw that right away." "How?" "That day at the well, I was just another man with a gun." She shook her head. "A man only interested in bounty would have let those outlaws take me, then tracked them for the reward. You risked your life for a stranger." That told me everything I needed to know about Tucker Thornton. He had no words to answer that, so he simply kissed her, careful not to disturb their drowsing son. Life settled into a rhythm marked by seasons rather than miles traveled. They expanded the ranch, adding land when neighboring properties came available. Tucker's reputation as a fair employer drew good hands to their operation, and Reed's Crossing became known for quality cattle and progressive ranching methods. When Felicity discovered she was expecting their second child, the news brought joy tempered with concern. Her first birthing had been difficult, and at 30 she faced greater risks. "I'm stronger now," she assured Tucker when she saw his worry, "and Dr. Miller says everything looks fine." Still, he hovered during her pregnancy, taking on more work himself rather than allowing her to strain. Hiram, now slowing with age but still sharp-minded, watched his son-in-law with approval. "Never thought I'd see a bounty hunter turn into such a mother hen," he teased one day as they mended tack together. "Former bounty hunter," Tucker corrected with a smile, "and a man learns what's truly worth protecting." Their daughter, Eleanor May Thornton, arrived on a stormy night in October of 1883, 5 years after her parents' first meeting at the Kingston well. Unlike her brother's difficult birth, Eleanor came quickly and with less complication, her lusty cries announcing her arrival to the world with authority. "She's got your determination," Tucker told Felicity, cradling their red-faced, squalling daughter. "And your timing," Felicity replied with a tired smile, waiting until the last possible moment, then making a dramatic entrance. As their family grew, so did the ranch. By 1888, Reed's Crossing had become one of the territory's most successful operations, with a reputation that drew buyers from as far as Chicago. 10-year-old Samuel showed his grandfather's gift with horses, while 5-year-old Eleanor followed Tucker everywhere, absorbing his lessons about cattle and land management with remarkable acuity. Not that life was without challenges. The harsh winter of 1886-87 decimated herds throughout the territory, and Reed's Crossing lost nearly a third of their stock. A dispute over water rights with a neighboring ranch led to tense confrontations that tested Tucker's commitment to leaving violence behind him. Through it all, the foundation he and Felicity had built remained strong. One autumn evening in 1888, exactly 10 years after they'd met, Tucker took Felicity back to the Kingston well. The town had grown, with a proper water system now serving most homes, but the old well remained, maintained as a backup during droughts. "Why are we here?" Felicity asked, puzzled by his insistence on this twilight visit. Tucker took her hands in his. 10 years ago today, I was just passing through. Had no intention of stopping more than a night." He looked around at the well where fate had changed his course. "Then I saw 3 men threatening the most beautiful woman I'd ever laid eyes on." Felicity's expression softened with memory. "You were quite heroic." "I was terrified," he admitted with a chuckle. "Not of them I'd faced worse, but of what I saw in your eyes afterward, something I thought a man like me would never deserve." "And what was that?" "Hope." He drew her close. "You looked at me like I might be worth something beyond my gun. No one had done that in a very long time." She touched his face, tracing the faint scar left by that long-ago bullet. "I was right about you." "You made me right," he corrected her. "You in this place, this life we've built." From his pocket, he produced a small box. "I've been saving from my share of the profits. Wanted to give you something to mark 10 years. Inside lay a delicate gold pendant, a perfect miniature water bucket with a tiny sapphire representing water inside. Felicity laughed through sudden tears as Tucker fastened it around her neck. "Because everything started here," he explained, "when I told you that you'd fetch no water for them again." "Best promise a man ever made me," she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. As they walked home hand in hand, the setting sun painted Kingston's buildings gold, much as it had the day a drifting bounty hunter had found his reason to stay. The road ahead stretched before them, not toward new horizons, but deeper into the life they'd created together, a life neither could have imagined that fateful day at the well. In the years that followed, Reed's Crossing continued to thrive. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man who combined his father's steady nerve with his mother's compassion. Eleanor, fiery and determined, displayed a head for business that would serve the ranch well as Arizona moved toward statehood. Tucker and Felicity weathered the transitions of life together, Hiram's peaceful passing in his sleep at 82, the gradual shift of daily operations to their capable children, the changing landscape as railroads and new settlements altered the territory they called home. When Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Tucker and Felicity attended the celebrations in Phoenix, now respected elders in a community they had helped build. At 64 and 54 respectively, their faces showed the lines of years lived fully in sun and wind, joy and sorrow. "Did you ever imagine this?" Felicity asked as they watched fireworks explode over the new state capitol. "That day at the well, did you ever think we'd be standing here 34 years later?" Tucker's arm tightened around her waist. "Never in my wildest dreams," he admitted. "I was just trying to get through each day back then." "And now?" He smiled, the same smile that still made her heart quicken after all these years. "Now I'm looking forward to each one, to seeing what our children build, to watching our grandchildren grow, to waking up beside you for as many mornings as were granted." The woman who had once feared she'd never see the ocean had now traveled to both coasts, had visited Chicago and Denver, had seen the world change from horseback to automobiles. The man who had once believed himself beyond redemption had helped raise a family, had built a legacy, had found purpose beyond violence. As they returned to the ranch that had grown from Hiram Reed's modest holdings into one of Arizona's premier operations, Tucker and Felicity stood on the porch of the home they'd shared for 3 decades, looking out over land that had witnessed their journey from strangers to soulmates. "No regrets?" he asked, a question he still posed sometimes, needing her reassurance that she hadn't missed opportunities because of her choice to stay with him. "Not one," Felicity replied, as she always did. She touched the gold pendant she still wore, a reminder of beginnings. "Everything I ever wanted was right here. Everything I never knew I needed found me at that well." Tucker's arms encircled her, strong despite the years. "You saved me," he whispered against her hair, now streaked with silver, but still as soft as the day he'd first dared to touch it. "We saved each other," she corrected him gently, "and built something that will outlast us both." From inside came the sounds of their family. Samuel's deep laugh, Eleanor's passionate debate with her husband about modernizing the ranch operations, the joyful squeals of grandchildren playing, the future, secure in the foundations they had laid. "I love you, Felicity Thornton," Tucker said, the words no less heartfelt for having been spoken thousands of times over their years together. "And I love you, Tucker Thornton," she replied, turning in his embrace to look up at the face she knew better than her own. "From that first day, when you said I'd fetch no water for them again." "Best decision I ever made," he murmured against her lips before kissing her, there on the porch of the home they had built from courage, second chances, and a love that had begun at a well in Kingston, Arizona territory in the summer of 1878,